these adults have at least one thing in common. They all made it through that interesting time of adolescence with a little help from a woman named Judy Blume and the friends she created on these pages.
I am a huge fan of Judy Blume, as I think every girl is after middle school.
I guess I've been reading Judy Blume since I was in elementary school, so her books are kind of timeless classics.
As an educator, even in a high school, everyone knows the two words Judy Blume. Whether you're young or whether you're old, she has touched your life in one way or another.
Judy Blume started introducing taboo-shattering characters to us 46 years ago in 1969. Her newest, 29th book is different from all of them. Not only is it for adults, her first in 17 years, it uses a series of tragic historic events as a backdrop for her fictional tale of 3 generations of families. Real-life events Blume is all too familiar with.
I think that I've never been afraid to fly, but on the other hand, I've never slept on a plane until I finished writing this book. And now I seem able, maybe I've worked it through.
During the winter of 1951-52, 14-year-old Blume was living in Elizabeth, New Jersey, when 3 planes fell out of the sky over the course of 58 days, killing 116 people and temporarily shutting down the Newark airport for an investigation.
You know, one was right near my junior high, one almost came through the window of the girls' public high school, and one falls into the playing field of the only orphanage in town. And I never forgot that boys came running out of the house, young boys, into the burning plane and rescued a lot of people. A lot of people from that plane survived.
It was a confusing and frightening time for the teen, and yet she kept those memories locked away until she started writing In the Unlikely Event 5 years ago.
I never told anybody, even George, and I will tell anybody anything.
In this conversation between Judy Blume and St. Louis author Ridley Pearson, Blume explains how her husband George played an important role in writing a character of this novel.
At which point, George Cooper stood up and said, "I can be your Henry Ammerman."
She also takes us into her writing world.
I always worry I'll die during a first draft because nobody...
They'll actually see the way we write.
Well, no, nobody would be able to make any sense of it.
And answers a few questions from the audience, including where she came up with that lovable character Fudge, and this.
I know the audience is wondering this because I get letters from them. Will I ever write a book about Margaret in menopause?
It's a candid, often funny, and enlightening conversation with the incomparable Judy Blume on this edition of Maryville Talks Books, presented by Maryville University and Left Bank Books, and media sponsors St. Louis Public Radio 90.7 KWMU and HEC TV.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
She deserves that and more. Judy's done a lot of interviews. And I am an adoring reader and a fellow writer. And so I intend tonight to ask her a lot about the writing and the writing process. And so, do you write from personal experience? Do you write from the experience of friends and others? Or do you write from your imagination or a combo? And how did that influence In the Unlikely Event?
All of the above.
All of the above.
Except that if you really want to get me started,
I do.
This book came to me all at once, something that's never happened to me before.
So beginning, middle, and end, boom?
Well, it took 5 years to write, so it can't have been exactly beginning, middle, and end, boom. But it came to me, boom. And I realized I had this story to tell, and it took place in the early 50s. There was a speaker on stage at the Key West Literary Seminar, and she was talking about stories her mother had told her about the 50s, and that was all I heard, the 50s. And it was like, I knew this story and I had to tell it, and it came to me with 3 families and 3 generations of 3 families and how they would all, come together. And yeah, but I didn't know any, the good stuff about writing is the surprises, right? So I had 5 years of surprises, some good surprises, some less good surprises, but I pretty much knew this story in a way that I never knew any story. And maybe because, when I was 14, these events really happened.
Yeah, let's talk about that,
town.
because I grew up in the 50s as well, and I read somewhere that you had said something like, it was an era where everything was just supposed to be good. And boy, did I experience that from my parents.
Well,
so.
our parents, right? They wanted us to be happy.
Yep.
Just be a good girl, Judy. Okay. Keep a lot of secrets. They kept secrets from us.
Exactly.
We kept secrets from them. But when these tragic events happened in my hometown within a 58-day period, I was younger than my protagonist. I mean, I wanted Miri to be as old as she could be, but still be in junior high school. She needed to be in junior high. So she's 15. I was in 8th grade when this happened.
A scant 7 minutes after taking off from Newark Airport, a twin-engine C-46 Army surplus plane bound for Miami plummets into the Elizabeth River in the center of Elizabeth, New Jersey, snuffing out all 56 lives aboard.
3 planes fell out of the sky in 58 days. Elizabeth, New Jersey was this close to Newark Airport, but I think kids and adults alike were looking for reasons, because, that's just too much of a coincidence. And even recently, I went back with TV crews, and, they wanted to see where it was. Well, there are other things there now, but we went back and looked, and as I looked, I thought, I'm back in 8th grade, and I'm thinking, maybe the boys were right in 8th grade when they said it was flying saucers and zombies and aliens and commies. Communists were very big, the big thing to fear. And the adults were talking themselves, but never to the children. The teachers never talked to us about it. So we invented our own. And 2 nights ago, wherever I was, I think it was Chicago, a woman came up to me and announced who she was. And she was one of the smart girls in my class. And it was the smart girls in my class who came up with the idea of sabotage. And I wanted to be one of the smart girls. And so I said, of course it's sabotage. And then I ran for the dictionary. All I'm trying to say is that this book, the process of writing this book, was different than my other books.
Yes, but when you say it came to you all at once, you're suggesting the story, the character. I mean, I've had ideas come to me where I go, ooh, that's I can see kind of a complete idea.
But I've never had that.
Yeah.
Never.
No, I hear
never know where I'm going. I never know what's happening.
Oh, so
that
was one of my questions. So you're not an outliner. You're a seat of the pants?
Oh, yeah, I think, well, yes.
Yes?
I am, yes.
Yes, seat of the pants?
Yeah, I think seat of the pants. I mean, I always say this to kids. They say, how do you do this? And I say, okay, I've come to say these things over all these years. I start on the day something different happens, right? And I think I know where I'm going with it, but I don't know anything that happens in the middle. That's the really scary part, because I don't really outline. I'm not saying I've never outlined.
Sure. So you didn't need 20 drafts. I've read that you've done as many as 20 drafts.
I did do 20 drafts, more than 20 drafts.
Of this?
Yes.
My gosh.
Yes, I'm a rewriter.
Years,
I didn't used to in the beginning when it was typewriters. Remember typewriters?
Sure. I started on a typewriter.
It was 5 drafts. It was a first draft, a second draft, then you sent it 3rd draft to the editor, then the editor called you in and you work with the editor, and then there was a polished draft. And that was it. And then came computers. and totally screwed up my life.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
Too much opportunity for rewrite. Yeah.
Whoa, and I love to rewrite, and all of my best stuff comes when I'm rewriting. If you read a first draft of mine, I always worry I'll die during a first draft because nobody would be able to make any sense of it. It would be like, what? But in this case, I had 5 months of research. So I had a notebook this thick, packed with this fabulous research, with the newspaper stories themselves, which I used and wanted to use from the beginning to help tell the story.
George got you your own microfiche machine, I heard.
George.
They set it up in the living room, and she's in there like her own library.
He got me my own microfiche machine, but that was because I was so allergic to the history room in the Monroe County, Key West
Too much dust.
Public Library. It was so dusty, and the historian was so sweet, and he would say to me, Judy, I'm going to open the closet now, so you better put something over your head. And I wore little surgical masks when I went to work.
Gosh, that's
so
a crack
finally
up.
it was so bad, George did find on eBay a machine, because they were defunct newspapers. But you know, when you read the language of the 50s, the newspaper reporters of the 50s, that descriptive language, I mean, nobody would be allowed to do that today. No reporter would be allowed to say it came down and broke apart like a swollen cream puff, you know. But that was there, and I wanted to use it.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know if you know this, but last fall, when I was still working on drafts. Last fall wasn't very long ago.
No, it was not.
In terms of writing a book.
That's right.
And the publishers said to me, you're not going to be able to use the exact newspaper stories because they come with bylines. And even though, sadly, those newspapermen, as they like to be called, are no longer with us, their bylines, you cannot give your fictional character, Henry Ammerman, the journalist, young journalist who makes his name reporting on this, you can't change the byline, so they're going to have to be composites. And I almost fell to the floor because I was still revising and rewriting, and I said, I'm not going to be able to make the deadline. At which point, George Cooper stood up and said, I can be your Henry Ammerman. And he was, and he is, and this is my husband, and he's a wonderful writer.
So let me ask you this. I think we both dislike sort of genre classification. I mean, I go crazy with all of that. A book's a book to me.
Hate labeling.
Exactly.
Hate
but
categories.
This is called an adult book, right? Yahoo. But Miri is a 15-year-old. So where did Miri come from in your adult book? How was that voice settled on?
You know, it wasn't. I mean, that's who needed to be there to tell the story, along with, you know, I wanted to go into the heads of the adults too. But I hate categories. I have no hesitation about saying anybody who wants to read this book can read it. If you're 15, share it with your grandma. That's what I like, the idea of, you know, find out about putting Angora sweaters in the refrigerator. And all of the fun things that we did in the 50s. But it could be disturbing to some people, and then put it down.
Right.
You know,
exactly right.
Put it down. It could be disturbing to adults. Nobody's making you read it. Put it down. Right. I would say give it a chance, because I have to say, this is a really funny thing that's happened. I think that I've never been afraid to fly, but on the other hand, I've never slept on a plane until I finished writing this book. And now I seem able, maybe I've worked it through. Did you know that my daughter became a commercial airline pilot? Yeah, she was an English major, of course. She was an English major at Wesleyan.
Means you have no useful skills.
And she graduated, and she said, what I really want to do is fly. And it's like, okay. And then here comes this book. And she reads an early draft because she's a reader, and she says, "Mother, how could you never have told me this story? I never told anybody, even George, and I will tell anybody anything."
How many have read a Judy Blume book or two? Thank you. So here's the thing, right, is that Judy doesn't write characters. She somehow manages to introduce us to people that we then come to love or hate, but we really know them as people, which is the hardest thing to do as a writer, is to invest the page, which is just a bunch of marks on a page, with enough soul and emotion that it's not simply a character, it's a breathing, living thing. And you are so incredibly good at this.
That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said.
Well, it's so, don't we think that?
Very much.
Yes, we think that. It's really true. And you are obviously, to me as a writer anyway, it seems like you must be so invested in these people. And yet, we've both written many, many books. And so we've used up all our friends and all our schizophrenic personalities. And by about book 4, you know, you're out of all of that. And you have to reach really deep to find new and different and interesting characters. Can you give us any glimpse into that cobweb of Judy Blume, of where EMMY comes from? What well do you tap for that?
I wish I could answer that.
Just
I
bubbles up.
don't know
No.
where they come from. I mean, I've been asked, you know, how do you do it? And it sounds trite.
Sure.
But I don't.
It's the magic
I don't
of
know.
writing, yeah.
It's the magic.
Yeah.
It's the. I don't know. It's like acting. You know, it's like acting, except you get to write it and then become it and direct it. So I don't know where they come from, but I know if I don't love them, if I don't care deeply about them, then neither
Then
will
we
my
won't.
readers.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Well, we know you love
forget
them
it.
and care about them.
And so much from talking to old friends. Each old friend who grew up in Elizabeth with me had one memory. And each memory became, in one case, a very important character, Mrs. Barnes. And everyone had one memory, and that memory wound up in the book.
I have kind of a word game I want to play with Judy.
Uh-oh, I'm hopeless at word
No,
games.
I don't think you will be.
You're not going to put me on a desert island and make me say who I'm
I'm not. I'm going to give you some words, and you can just say pass, or you can talk about them and how you deal with them in your writing.
Okay, fine.
Okay?
That's
How
a
about
big-
surprise?
As a writer, I live for surprises. That's a really good day at work. As a person, I can only tell you that someone gave me a 40th surprise birthday party, and I wanted to kill them.
Yeah.
I wanted to kill them.
How about tap dancing class?
I love tap dancing class. I started to tap dance. I was 40s, early 40s.
Wow.
And I moved to New York with George, and over a bagel shop on Broadway, I looked up and I saw people tap dancing. And I thought, I've always wanted to do this. Growing up as a nice Jewish girl in New Jersey, ballet was the thing that you did, but tap dancing was for others.
Sure.
And so I always wanted to tap dance and make noise and slap my feet around. And I went up the rickety staircase and I signed up, and,
my gosh.
and for 5 years, all I wanted to do was tap dance.
Wow.
I did not want to write anymore.
Wow.
I just wanted to tap. And there's something about it. You know, I'm not very good, but I love it. George doesn't know the difference. He thinks I'm great. He doesn't. I love it.
Censorship. I read that you're into the National Coalition Against Censorship.
Very, very much
Several
so.
of your books, Blubber, Forever, and Deanie, show up on those lists a lot. Can you talk to us a little bit about censorship?
Yes. After the presidential election in 1980, the censors came out of the woodwork. And it was like, now it's our turn. And if I don't want my child to read this book, then I don't want any child to read this book. And I'm going to school and I'm going to wave this book around and I'm going to have it removed. And in those days, before schools and libraries had policies in place, that very often happened. And I felt alone and isolated and sad and mad. And once I discovered the National Coalition Against Censorship, and you know how you feel a lot better getting out there and doing something.
Yes.
It's the determination that makes you write and keep writing,
Yes.
that makes you say, no, we're not going to take this, and we're going to work, and we're going to try. You know, it's still happening today.
Yeah.
Sherman Alexie's wonderful book. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's censored. I mean, it's challenged all the time. And I have a theory, but I'm sure it's right.
Will you share it with us?
Censors,
That's like the end of a chapter.
Censors don't come after books that kids don't like.
Right.
They come after the books that kids like. I mean, I knew
That's
as
true.
soon as Harry Potter took off, whoa, we're going to have a big censorship thing. And of course we did. As soon as, you know, those who want to challenge books find out that kids like it, because if kids like it, there must be something wrong with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, that's
Or
right.
it's going to lead them to do terrible things, as we know. They
Fear.
might go through puberty.
I can't ask any questions after that. So I'll let you ask the questions. The first question is from Linden, New Jersey, former resident. What do you find most gratifying about writing? How did you get started?
I got started because I was a kid with a lot of creative energy, and as long as I was at school, I had outlets. And I married young, as we did in those days, and I had 2 babies, and I loved having my babies, but I was missing something. And really and truly, it had never occurred to me to write. I always had stories inside my head from the time I was young, like 8 years old, I remember that. But that had never occurred to me. But that's what I started to do, writing imitation, Dr. Seuss picture books, because I was reading them to my kids. And that one thing led to another. And I started to write. And what was the other part?
Oh, good. No, there's a question I'm going to jump to because this is appropriate then. Where did you come up with the name Fudge? And what is Fudge doing now?
Oh. You will be happy to know that Fudge no longer eats his supper under the table, calling himself Frisky the Cat. Which he did, and my friends, you know, because in the very beginning, in Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, Fudge was based on my son Larry, who called himself Frisky the Cat. And my friends would come in and say, oh, you better do something about him. So I'm happy to report that he's grown up. He eats at the table. He's a foodie. In fact, he's a foodie. And he's a wonderful man, and he's big. And if he were here, he would tell you that, yes, in the beginning, Fudge was inspired by him, and where the name came from, I have no idea.
That's fabulous. Audra asks, what was your inspiration for Tiger Eyes, My Fave?
Oh, is Audra here? Hi. Do you
Security?
know, it's a really interesting question, because I didn't know until I saw, we made a movie of Tiger Eyes, you know, until I saw the movie. I didn't know that it was about my father and the loss of my father. I thought that I was writing about something that I knew about another family where a young girl had lost her father suddenly. And then, of course, I was writing about my experiences moving to Los Alamos, New Mexico, and living in Los Alamos, New Mexico. That was an experience. But when I saw that movie, and I couldn't stop crying, I mean, I knew there were always pages in that book that I would open and it would make me cry. I adored my father. My father, by the way, is the inspiration for Dr. O in this book.
Sure.
My father was a dentist, a much beloved dentist, and you know, I like to put dental heroes in my books, like good dentists, because he was, and he died suddenly. I was with him, and just as this book says, I think, you know, terrible things happen in life, but life goes on. People fall in love, people betray one another, life goes on. And I think that if there's any kind of message, which I hate the idea of messages, but that is the message. And I think I learned that from my father when I was still a girl. He used to say it a lot when bad things happened. And so I do believe that losing him was the inspiration for really getting deep into Davy's pain and sense of loss.
We have a 10-year-old in the audience.
Good.
Who asks, of all the books you've written, do you have a favorite?
Kids always want to know that.
Don't they?
Always. And I always have to answer the same way, and it's so disappointing. It's like asking a mother, which is your favorite child?
I use the same line.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, you love them all differently, and depending on the day you ask, right? They're my babies. They're my babies. I'll always have a special place for Fudge and for Margaret because they brought me my first readers. And if you let me say something now, I know the audience is wondering this because I get letters from them. Will I ever write a book about Margaret in menopause? And the answer is no. Margaret will always be 10. But just to satisfy you, Miri, who is not only 15 in this book, but is also 50.
Right.
Miri has hot flashes.
It's easy to see why her fans love her so much. She's honest about everything, just like the characters in her books. And while 77-year-old Blume says this is her last book tour, she promises to keep introducing fans to new characters in new books. Characters who will likely become friends to these readers, just as they have for the last 4 decades.